Hey everybody, welcome to this video. In this video, I'd like to describe some of the reasons why Knox was founded and then talk about the three pillars that Knox was founded upon. Knox was founded because we were interested in exploring the best ways to educate children. We knew that there were multiple ways to do so, and that traditional education has its ways, and there are a lot of people out there doing some really innovative things. And so we wanted to kind of thrust in our oar and try our hand at creating something that we would have liked to go to as students when we were younger. And so a lot of the things that we've created here at the school are really just creations because we said to ourselves, that would be so great to have that, and it is so important to have this because we want this particular outcome. And as we went through the research and followed people that were doing all sorts of really interesting things, we came up with what we feel is the best thing that we would do. Knox is really founded upon three different things. Number one, a good environment. Number two is the ability for students to self-direct, sometimes called self-government, and sometimes even called leadership. And then the third thing is that there is a real-world connection. Environment is so important at Knox because what we feel is that when a student walks into a building or walks into an outdoor space or walks into any environment in which they're going to learn something, they need to have an environment that allows them to learn and doesn't keep them from learning. And sometimes when we over-manage the environment, it tends to have drawbacks. So we've learned that having an extremely rich environment full of interesting things for students to do, having a really safe environment for them to feel comfortable so that they're not feeling judged and not feeling too much pressure, an environment in which they have somebody that encourages them all the time to pursue their passions. That these are the sorts of things that all students need, that all of us need when we want to learn anything. Many people notice when they come to Knox that Knox doesn't look like a typical school. And that's for a very important reason. We want it to be a place where students feel like they can build and create and do, and a place where they can feel like they can pursue something that's interesting. We have cement floors. We have walls that are full of art. We have a space that looks a little bit more like a shop because we want students to be able to feel as if it's a place of creation and it's a place of learning and growth. All of our environments are like that. Any of our outdoor spaces we want to be as learning, as supportive to learning as possible. It's also very important for us to have the tools and the technology for them to be able to get them over a hump, because sometimes what students will do is they'll get into an environment but they don't really have anything that will help them to create. And so when students get a little bit of inspiration and have a really good tool for the outlet of that inspiration, they go hog wild and will start to create things that are interesting and cool and neat and fun. We feel like tools are actually just a little bit of technology, and that technology can help them to be creative. It's actually something that we borrowed from Larry Rosenstock, a principal of a school down in San Diego. And a good example is of one of our teachers who, what she did was she taught students how to use stop motion animation on some iPads. But what she did is showed them all of the possibilities that stop motion could have. And then said, here are the iPads, and here is the animation, the software that you can use. And the students just developed and created and directed and starred in their own little films, and did so prolifically. There There were many, many films that were created during that time, and still, actually, that was 2 or 3 years ago. Students to this day still want to get out an iPad and say, I want to do a stop motion animation film, and it was because they really felt that they could pursue this thing to its fullest extent. The next thing in the Knox philosophy is that students have the ability to self-direct. We feel like when a person, a human, doesn't have the capacity to pursue the thing for themselves, in other words, to have the intrinsic desire to do so, it's very difficult for them to learn the thing that they're trying to learn. The reason it appears is because when you have an extrinsic motivator, the student tends to feel as if it doesn't come from them. It technically doesn't, right? And so it's difficult for a student to continue to pursue their passion because they feel like it's somebody else's passion. So what we want is for students to be able to pursue and then to fail at the things that are of interest to them. Failure is super, super important part of what we do. As a student learns to self-direct, they just sort of fail at stuff. They'll put a hole in a wall. They'll spill the paint. They do things that normally we would say don't belong in a school, but they actually do, because if we really want learning, then you need the student to be able to pursue that thing by their own accord, and then to be able to fail at it comfortably and safely in an environment in which the failure feels normal and doesn't feel like an ultimate failure, but feels like a small failure in order to help them to learn something. This happens every single day at Knox. Every single day somebody drills something into a board in the wrong place, splits out a piece of wood that they didn't want to split out. They spill paint on something. They accidentally spill glue on somebody else's project. Sometimes they'll ruin somebody else's project. These things are very important in our minds. And the ability to be able to on their own accord, to pursue this thing. And what that does is it builds so much confidence in a student, because they feel like failing is okay. They feel like making a mistake is okay. In fact, they feel like making a mistake is part of the learning process, not something that is separate from it. One of the things that we do at Knox is that we have an exhibition. And the exhibition is very purposeful. An exhibition is just a time period at the end of each learning period, at the end of 3 months or 4 months, in which a student is able to display their work. And what this does is it helps the student to be motivated inside of themselves, because they know that there's a deadline, they know that there's this end, and that end is going to be doing something that is real, and that their work is going to be judged, not by some propped up or by some outside of their understanding group. This is actually going to be a judging just by both their peers and their parents, their family members, and it's not a judging that is too harsh or critical. They get to show it, they get to celebrate it, to show everybody the things that they've done. And that celebration, and when they get to explain the thing that they've done in their own words, really, really allows them to then continue to pursue it, to feel like, oh, this is what I want to do, and I want to do more of this, and I want to, I got that feedback from my grandpa, and I'm really interested in continuing to do this particular thing. And then the last thing is that there is at Knox a very strong emphasis on a connection to the real world. We don't want kids to say the phrase, "Why am I doing this math?" We know that that phrase happens so much. It happens too much. If you can connect learning to something that is real world, that is something meaningful and immediate to them, they never ask those questions of, why am I learning? An example of this is we put on a safari for our exhibition a couple years ago. And the safari was this, we intended it to be, well, the adults in the room thought that it would be a very small, kind of scaled down version of a safari in which you could walk around a room and see different animals, but little models of animals. And the students were very opinionated on this and said that they wanted to have life-size animals. We, just as we typically do at Knox, we just said, yep, let's try to do that, and how can we help you? The giraffe's actually right above me right here, and you can't see it, but there were 4 students who were building a life-size giraffe. It was 16 feet tall, it had a wooden frame, it was going to be paper machéed on the outside of its body and then painted. And you can imagine all of the difficulties that an 11, 12, or 13-year-old would have, because those were the ages of the students, in building something like this. They had a lot of difficulty, and they actually needed to learn quite a few things in order to build that thing. Imagine the science, the math, and the engineering that would go into the structure that would hold up a giraffe head or neck. The students needed to learn that. They needed to learn math so that they could build the neck. They needed to learn proper engineering so that they could make the head stand up and not fall over every time. And then the students knew that there would be a group of people coming through this safari and looking at this giraffe. What that did was allow them to realize that this was not something just in their minds. It was not something that was just in a book or specifically just on a worksheet. It was way more than that. It was trying to make a room as much like a safari as they could, as lifelike as they could. And because it had such a strong real-world connection for them, they were willing to go to great lengths to learn whole bunches of things. Tons of skills were gained, and lots of academic skills. These aren't the only 3 things that we do at Knox, but these are the 3 pillars of Knox, as it were. They're the things that make Knox what it is today. And what it is this amazingly creative, fun, interesting place where every day that you walk in, you're going to see something drastically different. I could run through a list of dozens of things that we have done just over the past few weeks at Knox. And so these 3 things we feel like open up the doors for learning and open up the doors for creativity. So in review, the 3 things that are the pillars of Knox are: number 1, the environment; number 2, the ability to self-direct, to formulate and to pursue self-government; and number 3, the real-world connection, the connection that students have to something that is real and not just in a book or on paper. It's actually something that they do. These 3 things are probably the first 3 things to learn when trying to become a teacher at Knox. They're the things that are probably the most difficult too, because in many ways they're kind of antithetical to some of the ways that we learned when we were younger. We'll talk to you guys later.